My name is Scarlett, and I'm 34 years old. I built a tech empire with my husband Derek from our garage to an $8 million company. I was the brain behind every line of code in our system, while he was the charming face of the business, until he fired me to promote his mistress as CTO. What he didn't realize was that I had created a special backdoor in the code. One command line was all it took to expose their fraud and freeze the entire operation. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated at work. I met Derek at a tech startup conference in Boston 7 years ago. I was fresh out of MIT with a computer science degree and big dreams. With my long auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun and dark circles under my eyes from coding all night, I certainly wasn't dressed to impress anyone. I was there to learn to absorb information like the computer nerd I proudly was. Derek stood out immediately, tall, confident, with perfect teeth and a tailored suit that screamed success, even though he was just starting out like the rest of us. While I could write complex algorithms in my sleep, I struggled with small talk. So when this charismatic man approached me after my presentation on data security protocols, I was surprised. "Your code architecture is brilliant," he said, "but your business model needs work." Most people would have focused on my awkward delivery or my wrinkled button-up shirt, but Derek saw the potential in my ideas. He understood business in a way that I never had: the networking, the pitching, the marketing, things that made my palms sweat. We stayed at that conference venue until security kicked us out at midnight, huddled in a corner of the lobby sketching out ideas on napkins. Derek had the vision of a revolutionary data management system for businesses, and I knew exactly how to build it. Our partnership formed naturally. Late nights turned into early breakfasts. Business discussions evolved into personal conversations. Within 3 months, we were dating. By 6 months, we were inseparable. His apartment became our first unofficial office, with whiteboards covering every wall and takeout containers creating precarious towers beside our laptops. Derek proposed on our 1 year anniversary, getting down on one knee in that same conference center where we'd met. By then, we had already drafted our business plan, secured our first small investor, and registered our company, Next Tech Solutions. "We're going to change the world together," he promised as he slipped the ring on my finger. "Your brain and my business sense. We're unstoppable." I believed him completely. We were equals, bringing different strengths to the table. I would develop the technical infrastructure while Derek would handle the clients and investors. The perfect team. Our wedding was small and practical. We put most of our money into the business. My parents, both teachers from a small town in Maine, were cautiously supportive. "Just make sure you protect yourself," my father had whispered while dancing with me at the reception. I laughed it off. Derek and I were building something together. What was his was mine, and vice versa. We set up our first office in our garage, a cliché that we embraced with pride. The foundation of our business was a data management system I designed to help companies organize, protect, and analyze their information more efficiently than anything else on the market. I coded for 18 hours a day, sometimes fueled by passion and energy drinks, while Derek met with potential clients and investors. Our first 3 employees were fellow MIT graduates who believed in my technical vision. They worked for equity and promises crammed into our garage with space heaters in winter and fans in summer. The early days were exhausting, but exhilarating. Derek and I were building our dream together, celebrating small victories with cheap champagne and planning our empire on a whiteboard above our bed. What I didn't realize then was how those days of equality would slowly shift. As the technical genius behind the scenes, I was comfortable letting Derek become the face of Next Tech. He had the charisma, the ease with people that I lacked. But with each investor meeting, I skipped to keep coding. With each client dinner I missed to fix bugs, I was setting a precedent that would eventually be used against me. Still, in those early days, we were truly partners. Derek respected my technical decisions absolutely, and I trusted his business instincts. We were going to conquer the tech world together, as equals, as partners, as husband and wife. How naive I was. 4 years after founding Next Tech Solutions, we moved into real offices, a gleaming space in a downtown high-rise with our logo emblazoned on the glass doors. I remember the day we signed the lease, Derek picking me up and spinning me around in the empty space that would soon house 50 employees. "We're really doing it, Scar," he said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. This is just the beginning. By then, our company was generating over $3 million in annual revenue. Our client list included several Fortune 500 companies who relied on our proprietary system to manage their most sensitive data. The core of our success was the platform I had built, a complex, elegant system that outperformed anything else on the market. What made our software special was its adaptability. While competitors offered one-size-fits-all solutions, our system could be customized to each client's specific needs while maintaining ironclad security. The code was my masterpiece, complex and beautiful, and only I fully understood how all the pieces fit together. As a safeguard, I had built a special backdoor protocol into the system, not malicious, but a necessary emergency measure. If anything ever went catastrophically wrong, this hidden pathway would allow me to access the core functions and either repair or temporarily freeze operations. It was standard practice, though I kept the specific implementation details to myself. Not even our other developers knew the full extent of this feature. It was my insurance policy, my responsibility as the architect of the system. As we expanded, Derek became more and more the public face of Nextech. He spoke at conferences, appeared in industry magazines, and charmed potential clients over expensive dinners. I remained behind the scenes, leading our growing team of engineers and continuously improving our product. The distance between our roles grew gradually. Derek started traveling more frequently for business development. His wardrobe evolved from startup casual to bespoke suits. He joined exclusive clubs and golf courses for networking purposes. Meanwhile, I still wore the same style of jeans and hoodies, still worked the same long hours alongside our engineering team. I first noticed the shift in our dynamic during an investor meeting about 3 years into our success. I was explaining the technical roadmap for our next major update when Derek interrupted me. What Scarlett is trying to say is that we're adding some bells and whistles that will make the interface prettier, he said, laughing. The investors laughed with him. I was stunned. That wasn't at all what I was trying to say. The update included fundamental improvements to the system architecture that would increase processing speed by 40%. It wasn't cosmetic, it was revolutionary. Later, when I confronted him, Derek dismissed my concerns. You get too technical, Scar. Their eyes were glazing over. I was saving the meeting. More and more, I found myself being sidelined in strategic discussions. Derek began making promises to clients without consulting me about technical feasibility. He committed to deadlines that my team struggled to meet. When I raised concerns, he would say, "This is business, Scarlett. Sometimes we have to push the envelope to stay competitive." I also noticed troubling patterns in company spending. Our expense accounts showed lavish client dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, weekend retreats that seemed excessive, and gifts that seemed too personal for business relationships. When I questioned a $5,000 charge at a jewelry store, Derek became defensive. "You don't understand business development," he snapped. "Building relationships requires investment. While you're comfortable hiding behind a computer screen, some of us have to be out there making the actual deals that keep this company growing." It was the first time he had ever spoken to me with such condescension, implying that my work, the very foundation of our company, was somehow less valuable than his networking. I should have recognized it as a warning sign, but I was still blinded by our shared dream and history. Despite these growing concerns, I remained dedicated to Nextech. I continued refining our systems, adding new features, and ensuring our clients received the best possible product. I hand-selected every engineer on our team, growing our technical department to 30 talented developers. My role as CTO kept me fulfilled professionally, even as my personal relationship with Derek grew more distant. We were both so busy that it became normal to go days without a real conversation. He had his world of business meetings and networking events. I had my world of code and technical challenges. The company was still ours, still our shared creation, even if we were growing apart as individuals. What I didn't realize was that while I was pouring my heart and soul into improving our system, Derek was laying the groundwork to cut me out entirely. The first time I saw Natalie, she was sitting at a desk outside Derek's office. I had come up from the development floor to discuss a client request, and there she was, tall, blonde, and dressed like she was headed to a cocktail party rather than working at a tech company. "You must be Scarlett," she said with a practiced smile. "Derek's told me so much about you." I'm Natalie, his new executive assistant. I was taken aback. Derek hadn't mentioned hiring an assistant, let alone this polished woman who looked more like a model than an admin professional. Is he in? I asked, gesturing toward his office door. He's on an important call right now, she replied smoothly. But I'd be happy to schedule you in for later this afternoon. Schedule me in. I was the co-founder and CTO of the company, not to mention Derek's wife. Since when did I need an appointment? When I finally spoke with Derek, his explanation seemed reasonable enough on the surface. The company was growing, his calendar was becoming unmanageable, and Natalie came highly recommended from a business contact. What experience does she have in tech? I asked. Derek waved away my concern. She doesn't need tech experience to manage my calendar and handle correspondence, and she has a bachelor's in communications from UCLA. I let it go, focusing instead on the technical challenges that needed my attention. It was just an assistant position after all. But over the next few months, Natalie's role seemed to expand beyond administrative tasks. She began sitting in on executive meetings, taking notes, but occasionally offering suggestions that Derek would enthusiastically endorse. She started accompanying him to client dinners and industry events that I was too busy to attend. Our company continued to grow, now valued at nearly $5 million with interest from major players in the industry, looking to either invest or acquire us. I should have been celebrating our success, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The first concrete evidence came while I was updating our accounting module. I noticed several expenses that didn't align with our usual business patterns. A weekend stay at a luxury resort in Napa Valley, listed as a client meeting, though no client names were attached. A $3,000 charge at a designer boutique categorized as business attire. A reservation for two at the most exclusive restaurant in the city on a night when Derek had told me he was meeting with investors from Chicago. When I asked our CFO about these discrepancies, he seemed uncomfortable. Derek approved all those expenses, he said, not meeting my eyes. You'd have to ask him about the details. That evening, I confronted Derek at home, something that had become increasingly rare as we both worked longer hours. Are you questioning how I run this business? He asked, his tone immediately defensive. These are legitimate business expenses, Scarlett. Not everything needs to be scrutinized by you. I'm not just a random employee, Derek. I'm your wife and your business partner. When company money is being spent on luxury hotels and designer clothes, I have a right to know why. He sighed dramatically. This is exactly why I don't discuss these things with you. You're brilliant with code, but you don't understand the nuances of high-level business development. Sometimes maintaining a certain image is necessary. Sometimes entertaining clients means going above and beyond. And does entertaining clients include taking Natalie to Le Cirque on a Thursday night? I asked quietly. Derek's face changed a flash of something, guilt, anger, crossing his features before he composed himself. Natalie helps me navigate these social situations. You've made it clear you're not interested in that aspect of the business. I'm interested in transparency, I replied, and right now things don't seem very transparent. The conversation ended in stalemate, with Derek dismissing my concerns, and me retreating to my home office to lose myself in code. It was becoming our pattern. He deflected, I withdrew. Meanwhile, Natalie's presence at the company continued to expand. I noticed how she touched Derek's arm when they spoke, how they often shared private jokes in meetings, how she began referring to my technical team as the IT people, with thinly veiled condescension. My team noticed too. Marcus, my lead developer who had been with us since the garage days, approached me cautiously after a particularly tense executive meeting. Is everything okay, Scarlett? The vibe between you and Derek seems strained. I maintained professionalism, unwilling to let internal politics affect my team. We're just under a lot of pressure with the expansion. Nothing to worry about. But there was plenty to worry about. I discovered that Derek had given Natalie access to sensitive company files, strategic plans, financial projections, even some technical documentation that was well beyond her purview as an executive assistant. When I checked the system logs, I saw that she had accessed these files late at night, often when Derek's credentials were logged in simultaneously from the same location. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Something was happening between Derek and Natalie, and it went beyond professional boundaries. But I still didn't want to believe my husband. my partner in building this dream, would betray me so completely. Then came the restructuring announcement. In a quarterly executive meeting, Derek unveiled a plan to streamline operations for the next phase of growth. Natalie was present, sitting closer to Derek than I was, wearing a new title beneath her name on the presentation slide, Director of Operations. I listened in growing disbelief as she outlined changes that would essentially reduce my authority over the technical department, creating a new layer of management between me and my team, a layer that would report directly to Derek and apparently Natalie. After the meeting, I pulled Derek into his office. "What was that? You're restructuring my department without even discussing it with me first. It's not just your department, Scarlett. It's our company, and these changes are necessary for growth." He wouldn't look me in the eye. "And making Natalie Director of Operations. She has no experience in this industry beyond fetching your coffee for the past 2 years. What qualifies her to have any say in how our technical teams operate?" Derek's face hardened. "Natalie has a fresh perspective. She sees the big picture in ways that you don't. You're too deep in the code, Scarlett. Sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees." I felt like I was talking to a stranger. This wasn't the Derek who had stayed up late with me discussing how our technology could change the world. This was someone else. Someone who had begun to believe his own hype and forgotten who had built the foundation of his success. The final confirmation came 2 weeks later. I was supposed to be at a 3-day tech conference in Seattle, but the main panel I was scheduled to speak on was canceled last minute due to the moderator falling ill. I decided to fly home early, planning to surprise Derek. The surprise was mine when I opened the door to our house and heard voices from upstairs. Derek's low murmur and a woman's laugh I instantly recognized as Natalie's. I stood frozen in the entryway, my suitcase still in hand, as the reality I had been denying crashed down around me. I should have confronted them immediately, created a dramatic scene worthy of a reality show. Instead, I quietly closed the door and checked into a hotel. The technical part of my brain had taken over, processing information, methodically weighing options, looking for the optimal solution to a problem I had never anticipated facing. The next day, Derek called as if nothing had happened. "How's the conference?" "Enlightening," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I've learned quite a lot about loyalty and transparency." There was a pause. "That's good. When are you coming home?" "I'm already back in town. We need to talk, Derek. Tonight." The conversation that followed was surprisingly anticlimactic. Derek offered a practiced apology that never quite acknowledged the full extent of his betrayal. He talked about the pressures of running the company, the natural distance that had grown between us, how things with Natalie had just happened. "Maybe we need some space," he suggested, "to figure out what we both want." What he meant, I later realized, was space for me to accept my diminished role in both our marriage and our company, while he continued his relationship with Natalie. But I wasn't ready to confront that reality yet. Instead, I threw myself into work, spending even more hours monitoring the system, improving features, and supporting my team. And I began to notice more concerning patterns in the company operations. Files were being moved, permissions changed. Financial reports showed increasing discrepancies. Something wasn't right beyond my marital problems, and my technical instincts were on high alert. I created a hidden monitoring program that tracked unusual system activities without being detectable by normal security scans. What I discovered kept me awake at night. Derek and Natalie were accessing confidential company files, including client contracts, intellectual property documentation, and financial records, often in the middle of the night. One evening, while working late at the office, I overheard a conversation from Derek's office where he had forgotten to fully close the door. "The transition needs to happen soon," he was saying. "Once we secure the new funding round, we can implement the leadership changes." "What about Scarlett?" Natalie's voice. "She won't go quietly. She built too much of the core system." "She's a technical person, not a business leader," Derek replied dismissively. "We'll offer her a generous exit package. By the time she figures out what's happening, it'll be too late to do anything about it." I slipped away before they could discover me, my heart pounding. They were planning to push me out of my own company, the company I had built from nothing line of code by line of code. That night, I activated my monitoring program to its highest level and began preparing for what I now knew was inevitable. 6 months after I discovered Derek's affair, I was called into a meeting in our largest conference room. Derek sat at the head of the table, flanked by Natalie on one side, and two men in expensive suits on the other. Lawyers, as it turned out. A few other board members were present, looking uncomfortable. Scarlett, Derek began using his practiced CEO voice. We've called this meeting to discuss the future technical leadership of Nextech. I remained silent, watching him struggle slightly under my steady gaze. As you know, we're entering a critical growth phase. The company has reached a valuation of nearly $8 million, and we're in talks with major investors who could take us to the next level. I nodded, waiting for him to get to the point. After careful consideration and numerous discussions with the board, he continued, glancing at the uncomfortable board members who avoided eye contact with me. We've determined that the company needs fresh technical leadership for this next phase. Fresh technical leadership? I repeated flatly. Yes, we're instituting a change in the executive structure effective immediately. Your position as CTO is being eliminated. The room was silent. I looked at each person in turn, finally landing on Natalie, who was failing to suppress a smug smile. And who will be overseeing the technical aspects of the business? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Derek cleared his throat. Natalie has demonstrated exceptional understanding of our strategic vision. She'll be stepping into a newly created role of Chief Innovation Officer, overseeing both technical and operational functions. I almost laughed. Natalie could barely operate the company's email system, let alone understand the complex architecture I had built. I see, I said quietly. And what qualifications does Natalie have to run a technical department? The lawyer interjected before Derek could respond. Mrs. Turner, your husband has explained that this is a business decision that has been approved by the board. We're prepared to offer you a generous severance package. He slid a document across the table. I glanced at it without touching it. The terms included 6 months' salary and benefits contingent upon signing a non-compete agreement and a comprehensive release of all claims to intellectual property developed during my tenure. You want me to sign away my rights to the system I built from scratch? I stated not a question, but a confirmation. All work you performed was done as an employee of Nextech Solutions, the lawyer explained condescendingly. The intellectual property belongs to the company. I stood up slowly, gathering my composure. I think you'll find that the situation is more complicated than that. I'll need time to review this with my own legal counsel. Derek frowned. We need an answer today, Scarlett. The transition begins immediately. Immediately? I repeated. Yes, we've already communicated the change to the technical team this morning. Security will escort you to clear out your personal belongings. The betrayal was so complete it was almost impressive. Derek had planned everything, from the timing of the meeting to having security ready to escort me out. My husband of 6 years, my business partner, the man I had built an empire with, was treating me like a potential corporate spy. Derek, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me, you're making a catastrophic mistake. For just a moment I saw uncertainty flash across his face. Then Natalie placed her hand over his on the table, and his expression hardened again. The decision is final. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. 20 minutes later, I was walking through the open office area, with a cardboard box containing my personal items, a security guard trailing behind me like I was a criminal. Employees, many of whom I had personally hired, watched in shock. Some had tears in their eyes. Marcus, my lead developer, stood up as if to say something, but I subtly shook my head. I wouldn't drag anyone else down with me. Outside the building, standing on the sidewalk with my sad little box, the reality hit me fully. I had been fired from the company I co-founded by my husband to make room for his mistress. It was so cliché, it would have been funny if it weren't my life being destroyed. My phone pinged with a text from Derek. The divorce papers will be delivered to your apartment tomorrow. I hope you'll be reasonable about this too. Reasonable. As if I were the unreasonable one for being upset about being betrayed on every possible level. I went to my apartment, a place I'd barely used since we bought our house 3 years ago, but had kept as a private office space. It felt cold and empty, much like my future seemed at that moment. For the next week, I barely ate or slept. I ignored calls from friends and family, sinking into a depression that felt bottomless. The divorce papers arrived as promised, with terms that were insulting at best. Derek was claiming that I had contributed minimally to the company's success and therefore was entitled to only a small percentage of its value in our divorce settlement. It might have continued that way, me spiraling into despair, if not for two things that happened in the second week after my firing. First, Marcus reached out via a secure messaging app we had used for work. "Something's wrong with the system," he wrote. "Natalie has no idea how it works, and they're promising clients features we can't deliver. Derek is talking about selling the company to Grayscale Tech for $12 million based on capabilities we don't have." Grayscale was one of our competitors known for buying smaller companies and gutting them for their client lists and intellectual property. The second thing was a call from Jasmine Liu, a lawyer friend from college who had gone into intellectual property law. "I heard what happened," she said when I finally answered my phone. "This is bullshit, Scarlett, and you know it. You built that system. You need to fight back." "What's the point?" I asked, staring at the ceiling from my couch where I'd been lying for hours. "He's got the board, the lawyers, everything." "Scarlett Turner, this is not you," Jasmine said firmly. "You're the most brilliant coder I know, and you've never backed down from a challenge. You think Derek and his little assistant can run that company without you? They're already floundering. Fight for what's yours." Her words ignited something in me, not just anger, but a sense of responsibility. I had built a system that our clients relied on, that our employees' livelihoods depended on. Derek and Natalie were making promises they couldn't keep, potentially endangering the entire operation out of greed and arrogance. "You're right," I said finally. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." I spent the next day combing through my employment contracts and the company formation documents with Jasmine. We discovered that while I had signed an intellectual property agreement, there were significant ambiguities regarding the core system architecture that I had begun developing before Nextech was officially formed. Meanwhile, more messages came from former colleagues. The system was experiencing unexplainable errors. Clients were getting restless. Natalie was blaming the development team, who, in turn, were threatening to quit en masse. Through these back-channel communications, I also learned something even more disturbing. Derek and Natalie had been moving company funds to offshore accounts, likely in preparation for the sale to Grayscale. They were planning to cash out personally while leaving employees and smaller investors with worthless stock options. "This goes beyond a messy divorce," Jasmine said when I showed her the evidence. "This is fraud." I faced an ethical dilemma. I still had my emergency backdoor access to the system, a fact known only to me. I could use it to expose what Derek and Natalie were doing, but I had to be careful about how I proceeded. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. For myself, for our employees, and for our clients, who trusted us with their data. The final straw came when I received an amended divorce filing claiming I had committed corporate espionage and was attempting to sabotage the company, a preemptive strike to discredit me if I tried to speak out about what was happening. That night I made my decision. I would use my access not to destroy, but to reveal the truth. With Jasmine's legal guidance, I developed a careful plan. This wasn't about revenge, it was about protecting what I had built and exposing the fraud that Derek and Natalie were perpetrating. The first step was documenting everything. My role in creating the company's core technology, the contributions I had made, and the questionable activities I had observed. Jasmine helped me prepare a comprehensive file that established my intellectual property claims and detailed the financial irregularities I had noticed. "If you're going to use your backdoor access," she warned, "you need to be extremely careful. We need to make sure your actions are defensive and protective, not retaliatory." I spent days reviewing the system logs remotely using a secure connection that couldn't be traced back to me. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Derek and Natalie had been systematically moving company assets and client funds through a series of complicated transactions designed to obscure their ultimate destination: personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. They were also sharing proprietary information with Grayscale, in preparation for the sale, effectively giving away trade secrets before any deal was finalized. The company's $8 million valuation was being artificially inflated through misrepresentation of technical capabilities and client commitments. "They're selling smoke and mirrors," I told Jasmine. "The system can't do half of what they're promising Grayscale and the new investors. When everyone realizes that, it'll collapse, and the employees and smaller investors will be left holding the bag." Jasmine finished, while Derek and Natalie sail off into the sunset with millions. I also discovered that they had been altering my original code, trying to remove traces of my creation, while claiming Natalie had been instrumental in the system's development. It was clumsy work that introduced dangerous vulnerabilities. They were compromising the very product they were trying to sell. After gathering all the evidence, I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. I could take the legal route, filing whistleblower complaints and lawsuits that might take years to resolve. By then, the company could be gutted, the employees scattered, the technology ruined. Or I could use the backdoor I had created, not to destroy, but to reveal. I made my decision at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Sitting in my darkened apartment, illuminated only by the blue glow of my laptop screen, I accessed the system through my hidden protocol. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I prepared to enter the command that would change everything. The code I wrote wasn't destructive. It didn't delete data or crash the system. Instead, it did something much more powerful. It made everything transparent. Financial transactions, communications, code changes, client promises. All of it would be systematically documented and organized, with copies automatically sent to the company's board, major investors, and relevant regulatory authorities. It was elegant in its simplicity, a single line of code that would illuminate all the dark corners. I took a deep breath and executed the command. The effect wasn't immediate and dramatic like in the movies. No alarms, no flashing screens, just a small confirmation message that my protocol had been initiated. But I knew what would happen next. By morning, the automated systems would begin compiling the information. By afternoon, the notifications would start going out. By evening, Derek and Natalie's schemes would be exposed. I closed my laptop and finally fell into an exhausted sleep. I woke to my phone exploding with notifications. The financial news sites were reporting that trading in Next Tech Solutions stock had been temporarily suspended, pending an investigation into potential financial irregularities. The company's announced sale to Grayscale was on hold. Regulatory authorities had requested all company records be preserved. Then the personal messages started coming in. Frantic texts from Derek alternating between threats and pleas. "What did you do? They're saying there's evidence of fraud. This is your doing, isn't it? Please call me Scarlett. We can work this out. If you've damaged the company, I'll sue you for everything you have. Baby, please, we can fix this together. I made a mistake." Natalie called 17 times before I blocked her number. By mid-afternoon, the story had exploded across tech news sites. Next Tech Solutions under investigation, CEO and executive accused of fraud. The articles mentioned anonymous whistleblower evidence and internal systems that automatically documented financial discrepancies. My protocol had worked perfectly. It hadn't altered or destroyed any data, merely organized and exposed what was already there. The system itself continued to function for legitimate business operations, but the fraudulent activities were now visible to everyone who needed to see them. I watched the chaos unfold from a distance, feeling strangely calm. This wasn't the ending I had imagined for the company I had helped build, but it was better than watching it be hollowed out and destroyed by greed. 2 days later, I received a call from the lead investigator at the SEC. They wanted to talk to me about the system architecture and my role in the company. Jasmine accompanied me to the meeting, where I explained everything: my creation of the core technology, my backdoor protocol, and what I had observed of Derek and Natalie's activities. "The system you built," the investigator said, looking impressed despite himself, "it essentially created its own audit trail that they couldn't detect or disable. That's remarkable." "I designed it to be honest," I replied simply. "They tried to use it dishonestly." As we left the meeting, Jasmine squeezed my arm. "You know what this means, right? You're not just in the clear. You're a hero. The whistleblower who saved the company from being gutted." I wasn't sure about the hero part, but for the first time since being escorted from the building with my cardboard box, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things would work out. 6 months after my single line of code exposed the fraud at Next Tech Solutions, I stood outside the building I had once been escorted from in disgrace. The company logo had been modified slightly, but it was still recognizable as the design I had sketched on a napkin years ago with Derek. So much had changed. Derek and Natalie were facing multiple fraud charges. The investigation had revealed even more extensive financial misdeeds than I had initially discovered. They had been siphoning money from the company for over a year, creating fake client contracts to inflate the company's value, and making technological claims that couldn't possibly be fulfilled. The board, desperate to salvage what remained of the company, had reached out to me through their interim CEO, a respected industry veteran named Thomas Chen, who had been brought in to stabilize operations. "We need you, Ms. Turner," he had said during our first meeting at a neutral coffee shop. "The system is deteriorating without proper maintenance, and none of the current team fully understands the architecture." "I was fired, escorted out by security," I reminded him. "Now you want me back as a technical consultant to start," he clarified, "with the potential for a leadership role if things go well. The board recognizes the mistake that was made." Mistake was a polite way to describe what had happened, but I appreciated his diplomacy. After consulting with Jasmine, I agreed to return as a consultant with specific conditions: complete autonomy over technical decisions, recognition of my intellectual property contributions, and a seat on the board once the restructuring was complete. Walking back through those glass doors was surreal. Employees stopped what they were doing, staring in disbelief. Then Marcus started clapping, and others joined in until I was facing a spontaneous standing ovation that brought tears to my eyes. All right," I said, embarrassed but touched. "We have a lot of work to do." And we did. The system had degraded significantly under Natalie's mismanagement. Client data was at risk, features were malfunctioning, and the elegant code I had written had been butchered by hasty, incompetent changes. For weeks, I worked with the technical team to restore stability, often pulling all-nighters reminiscent of our startup days. Gradually, the system returned to its former reliability. Clients who had been on the verge of leaving renewed their contracts. The company's reputation began to recover. 3 months into my consultancy, a court officially recognized my intellectual property claims to the core system architecture. This strengthened my position significantly and led to a formal offer from the board return as CTO with an ownership stake that reflected my contributions. Around the same time, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Derek, released on bail pending his trial. "Scarlett," he said when I opened the door, looking significantly less polished than the last time I'd seen him. "Can we talk?" "You look good," he said, attempting a charming smile that fell flat. "I hear the company is recovering under your guidance." "What do you want, Derek?" he sighed, dropping the facade. "Look, the prosecutors have a strong case. I'm looking at serious time unless I can make a deal." "If you would speak on my behalf, tell them I was manipulated by Natalie." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You want me to lie to save you after everything you did? We built that company together." He argued, a flash of the old Derek showing through. "Everything I did was to make it successful." "No," I corrected him. "Everything you did was to enrich yourself at the expense of the company we built. You betrayed me, our employees, our clients, everyone who trusted you." "I made a mistake," he admitted, looking desperate now. "I got caught up in the lifestyle and Natalie's vision of what we could be. But I never stopped loving you, Scar." There was a time those words would have melted me, would have made me consider giving him another chance, but that time had passed. "I'll be honest with the prosecutors, Derek. I'll tell them exactly what I know. No more, no less. And what I know is that you deliberately committed fraud, betrayed your fiduciary duties, and attempted to steal intellectual property that wasn't yours to take." He left without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. The divorce was finalized a month later, with terms that reflected my contributions to the company's success and intellectual property. I felt no satisfaction, only relief that this chapter was closing. Meanwhile, I faced a decision about my future with Nextech. The board wanted me to take on a permanent leadership role. Part of me was tempted. It was my creation after all. But another part of me questioned whether I wanted to remain connected to something with such painful associations. An unexpected alternative emerged when a group of investors approached me about starting a new venture. They had been impressed by both my technical skills and my ethical stance during the Nextech scandal. "We want to back you," their spokesperson explained. "Your vision, your leadership, your technology. No constraints, no compromises." After careful consideration, I made my decision. I would help Nextech transition to stable new leadership, ensuring the system was properly maintained and documented. But my future lay elsewhere, in building something new, something entirely mine with ethical principles at its foundation. I started Turner Innovations with 5 team members from Nextech who had stood by me during the crisis, including Marcus. Our focus was data security and ethical AI building on the lessons I had learned, but taking the technology in new directions. 1 year after the fateful line of code that exposed the fraud, my new company secured its first major client. Ironically, a firm that had previously worked with Nextech but had been disillusioned by the scandal. "We trust you, Ms. Turner," their CIO told me. "Your reputation for both technical excellence and integrity precedes you." That meant more to me than any financial success. The legal proceedings against Derek and Natalie concluded with both receiving sentences for fraud and financial crimes. I felt no joy at this news, only a sense of justice being served, and a chapter finally closing. Looking back, I realized that losing everything, my marriage, my company, my sense of security, ultimately led me to find something more valuable, my authentic voice and purpose. I no longer defined myself as Derek's wife or Nextech's hidden genius. I was Scarlett Turner, founder and CEO of my own company, creator of technology that helped rather than harmed. The painful lessons taught me that true success isn't measured by valuations or acquisitions, but by the integrity with which you build and the positive impact you create. My new company might never reach the $8 million valuation that Nextech achieved, but every dollar would be earned honestly, every line of code written with purpose. Sometimes I think about that single line of code that changed everything, how something so small could have such enormous consequences. It reminds me that we all have more power than we realize to change situations that seem hopeless. If you're watching this and facing your own seemingly insurmountable challenges, remember that you have the power to write your own code to change your own story. Has anyone ever underestimated you only to regret it later? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they have the power to turn things around. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one.